Great. So, okay. So let me first detail out the agenda, right? What we have for today. We're going to cover about the Selenium architecture. Okay. When I say about Selenium architecture, there are different subtopics which we should be doing. The first thing is that we have to know about the history of Selenium, right? When it started and where and when it started, like what were the components which were there, right? And then we'll see like what all changes came in as part of the journey, right? So we need to understand the journey. We need to understand the journey of Selenium, right? We will also try to understand the era in which the Selenium came in, right? And what were the challenges there which it tried to solve, using which it gained so much popularity. Okay. Now, okay, the era, the reasons of the popularity, right? I'll come on to that part, or reason for popularity. After this, I'll also cover. Then we'll cover about the present components, right? We have in Selenium. So present components we have in Selenium, right? Components in Selenium. What are those, right? And then we'll go in and try to understand what is the architecture, right? The current architecture for Selenium WebDriver, how it really works. Okay, we have already covered one of the components of Selenium, which is Selenium Grid, in the previous session. So today is more about on the Selenium WebDriver. Okay, so we are going to read about the architecture, and this architecture is again based on client server setup, right? The first session, right, as part of this bootcamp. So this is automation architect bootcamp, right? If someone wants to watch the previous session, please go to the channel on the YouTube. The channel name is @podcast, and you can watch the previous videos on this, right? Now, so this is the agenda, right? And I will cover a lot of other things here in between. So let's start. So again, just to start, my name is Akhil Jain. Okay, I would be walking through I'm running this free automation architect bootcamp where I conduct sessions on every Sunday for 1 hour and try to cover some new topics. Okay, so today's topic is Selenium architecture, and let's start. So in case of Selenium, right, it all started in the year 2024, 2004. Okay, with the company named as ThoughtWorks. Okay, with the company as ThoughtWorks. Today we are into the year 2024, right? Almost 20 years, right? And it is still going on, right? It will still go in, I think, for good number of years to come in. Okay. Now, what is really Selenium, right? First of all, let's also try to understand what is Selenium. Selenium helps you to automate your web automation. Okay, your web tasks, whatever tasks you may have on the website, right? You can automate all of this using your Selenium library. Okay, so that is what Selenium provides as a solution. Okay, that it helps you to automate your web automation tasks. Okay, now when in the year 2004, right, the industry was already doing some automation, right? They were doing the automation, but at that point of time, right, the majority of the market, right, in the industry was captured by a tool named as, which was coming from HP, and the name was QTP. Okay, people would be remembering this with the name of UFT also. Okay, but this was the tool which was used majorly in most of the companies for performing the automation. Now, what was the thing? This was a paid tool. Okay, this was a paid tool. Okay, and the way it used to work was, it was very different from how Selenium works. Okay, so you used to form an object repository. We had a record play feature there, right? The object repository, we used to have a record and replay kind of a feature where we could record the transactions when we do it on the web. Once it is recorded, it will record the steps also and the objects, right? When I say objects, you can understand like different web elements. What all elements you want to interact with, it will start capturing them and create an object for those elements inside that repository, right? So all of that was being used. Again, we're not discussing UFT, so I will not go into deep part of it. Okay, but try to understand that this was a tool in which was in relevance there. Now, with in this journey, right, slowly and steadily, right, Selenium being open source, right? It's open source, it is free to use, right? It is free to use, there is no licensing required, right? And the language which started to work was Java, right? The most prominent language, right? Even then and even now also. Okay, so when it all started, so using these three aspects, right? Using all these three aspects, it gained so much popularity, and because it was free, people started moving away from this tool, right? This tool, and started moving to the Selenium part. Okay, and and over the years, right, Selenium has provided so many capabilities within it, which helps us and which enables us to do all our automation tasks. Okay, so that is what Selenium is, right? And that is what the Selenium gained the popularity for. Now moving ahead, right, let's try to understand when it started, right? What was the components it offered? Okay, so if you would see, right, earlier, right, if you would check the Selenium website, let me show you. If you check the Selenium website, Selenium website as of now, right, it has three major components. One is, as of now, right, as of today's date, it has three main components. One is WebDriver, second is the IDE, and third is the Selenium grid. Okay, third is the Selenium grid. Now, okay, so currently, right, let me write it now here, right? So we have ID, okay, we have grid, Selenium grid. Again, we have covered grid in the previous session, so I'll not talk much about it, but let's talk about all this, the other parts, right? So earlier also, when it started, right, when it started, they still had this ID part, and they also had the grid part, like we have it today, right? But a more basic version of it. Today we have more lot of capabilities, and the architecture is also different, and how things works is in an improved state. Now, what else we have? Today we have WebDriver, right? WebDriver. Earlier we did not have, when it started, right? It was not WebDriver. It was with something with the name as RC. Okay, and the complete name was Selenium RC. Okay, this was Selenium RC. What does RC stands for? RC used to stand for the term as remote control. Okay, so this was remote control. Now, how this used to work and why this got deprecated and WebDriver originated, and why was the need of WebDriver and all that, right? We need to understand that perspective also, right? Okay, but let's first try to understand what are these three components, right? So we understood that instead of remote control, we would be using WebDriver. ID was earlier also, and today also ID exists. Grid was earlier was also available, and today also grid exists. Okay, now let's just focus on on these three components as of now. Like, what solution does this provide? Again, grid we have already covered. This helps us to do distributed testing, right? If you wanted to cover a lot of different platforms, a lot of different nodes with different browser versions and all, right, you need a medium or a facilitator using which you could manage all such nodes, right? Then you should be using grid. Okay, so if you wanted to do a distributed testing, let's say you have different types of machines, Mac, Mac machine, and here you want to use Safari. There is a machine, Windows machine, on which you want to use Chrome. There is a machine of Windows again. You want to use Chrome version, but let's say 97th version of it, right? So similarly, you could have different nodes here. Let's say as part of your testing, you required to run your same test case on different platforms. So you could use Selenium Grid for it. Okay, that is the purpose of having a Selenium Grid. It helps you to manage all these nodes, right? But it is doing only that piece, right? The other parts are still being done through this WebDriver. Okay, I'll come to that part. What is IDE? IDE is a plugin which you add to your browser, okay, which you can add to your browser. And I think the supported browser are either Chrome or Firefox, if I'm not wrong. Okay, we can check that part. What happens using this plugin? We can record our transactions. We can record our transactions, whatever we wanted to do, and use it, right? But if someone who has already used ID, they would know that the language, right, in which it generates the transaction or the code it generates, right, it is Celanese. Okay, it is not Java or some other language. Although there are modes where you could convert your this code, right, into Java or any other language, which is possible, right? But again, it does not provide you such rich code base which you could use it as is in your framework, right? it is better to use a WebDriver directly than to use IDE. Okay, from my personal experience also, I feel the same thing. Okay, so again, if you want to understand like use the capability of record and play, then you can use this ID part, which is a plugin, right? Earlier also it was doing the same thing, and the grid was just in the same part. Now coming on to this part, right, which is the main part for our discussion today, the WebDriver, right? And why WebDriver originated and what was Selenium RC. Let's come on to this part, right? So we will first start with WebDriver, right? I just wanted to show like what is the current architecture, how things works. Although we discussed it in our first session, but I still wanted to revisit this. Okay, so let's say this, right? Okay, let me see. Everyone there, right? Okay, fine. Okay, here, right? What we have to do is when we say about the Selenium, right? WebDriver architecture. WebDriver architecture. Right, first of all, what is a WebDriver, right? Again, WebDriver, this part here, right, this WebDriver here is a client library, right? It's a language binding. It is like a package, Java package, right, which you could use in your project, right? You add this as a dependency. It provides you methods, classes, and everything, right, using which you could write your automation logic, right? Web automation logic. So you can understand this, like this is a piece of code which you have access to. You use the methods within it to write your automation task. Okay, that is what it is, right? This Selenium WebDriver part. Okay, so this is like it helps you to write to prepare your client. That is what it is. Okay, so let's go back. So what you do is you will come here and add this WebDriver as a dependency in your project, right? Add WebDriver as a dependency, right? As a dependency in your project, and using this WebDriver, you will prepare your client. You will prepare your client. When I say client, right, you can understand a simple Java program, simple Java file where you are just opening up the URL also, right? Let's say I did something like this in a Java file. I wrote a program like this where I'm saying WebDriver WD equals to new Chrome driver, right? And I'm saying WD dot get, and I'm providing the URL, right? This is my client. This file is my client, and if I run this file, right, whatever transactions I want to do, I can specify here, and this complete thing will be my client. Okay, so your automation framework, right, when you execute that, it becomes your client. Okay, understand that perspective. Now coming on to the architecture part. See here in this line, in the client server architecture, we have two things. One is client, which is this. Okay, one is client, which is this. Let me write here, client, and we have the server, which is this here. Okay, and we are talking about WebDriver architecture, right? How this all works. So using this WebDriver part, right, which is a dependency or a Java library, right, which Selenium team is providing. Using this, you prepared your client, right? You prepared your client, and you wrote all your code. When you ran this, right, you run the client. What will happen is it will do all of this, right? It will do all of this, but okay, what will happen here? All of this your code, right? .java thing, right? Whatever you written in this language. See, you could be using Java to write this. Someone could be using Python to write this, right? Someone else could be using C# to write the same logic, right? All of this you could write, right? But again, but how it gets translated into an action on a browser? Let's say this is my browser. This is my Chrome browser. This is my Chrome browser. I want to automate some task on it, right? Again, let's say username, password. There's a field, username, password, and submit button, right? I want to automate this task. So what I need is, I already had WebDriver and I used it to prepare my client. What is the server here? What is the server, right? The server is that to work on the browser, right? It is not that what you wrote in Java will directly, all this code will directly go to the browser and then things will run. No, that is not how it runs. What will happen is this Java code, right, what you have written, right, will get translated into REST API calls. Okay, this will get translated into what? REST API calls. REST API calls. This will get translated into this. And then what is the server here? We have not discussed like what is the server here. In case of web automation, what is required is that for any specific browser, right? You need a driver. Right? For web automation, what you need is you need a relevant driver for that specific browser. For Chrome browser, the driver name is Chrome driver. Okay. And this will act as your server. Okay. So your client is what? The scripts which you have written. And depending on the target browser you're trying to target, right? You will have to make your Chrome driver as a server, right? And it has to be available, right? Nowadays with Selenium 4, you don't need to even download this driver, right? Beforehand. Once you start running the scripts, right, it automatically takes care of it and it downloads it, it consumes it and able to automate the task which you have written, right, and mimic the action on the browser. Okay, that is what in today's world with Selenium 4 it is possible. But let's just try to convert this part here, right? So everything you wrote in Java, right, gets converted into REST API calls, and this conversion, right, this conversion of code into this, right, happens using what? It happens using the W3C WebDriver Protocol. Okay, using this protocol, right, what happens is everything you wrote here, right, based on it, the client here, right, will convert everything into a REST API call. Okay, and then those would be reached to the server, right? Once the server receives these calls, right, because it's, see, who prepares this Chrome driver? The Google team, right? The team which is responsible for preparing this browser, right, who developed this browser, is also providing us this driver. Okay, so they know, like, if they have to mimic some action on the browser, the driver knows how to do it, right? But driver needs instructions, so as an input, right? So what are those inputs for the Chrome driver? These API calls. Once it receives those API calls, right, let's say you fired a post call, and the post endpoint was about, let's say, initiate session, let's say, right? So I'll show you that page, the WebDriver protocol page. So you initiate the session and you provided some body to the call, right? So once this is received at this server, right, it will read through the endpoint and get to know it. Okay, for this endpoint and for this kind of a body or parameters or something, right, I need to do something specific, right, which is based on the guidelines of this, right? So what it will do is it will then go in and do what all is required, right, which is again internal to Google, right? How it is translating this API request into an action on a browser, right? That is something internal to the Google, right? That we don't have to care about. What we need to be knowing is that how to write our scripts, right? And we don't even want to care about like how that conversion of our scripts to API calls happens. No, it's just that we need to have that understanding. Okay, so our code gets translated to API calls. It reaches to the Chrome driver. Chrome driver receives that input and then makes the necessary. It generates necessary code, right, so that it could invoke the necessary action on the browser, right? And then it goes to the browser and do all the asked tasks, right? And once it performs it, browser sends the response back to the server. Chrome driver receives it. Chrome driver prepares a REST API response so that it can send back to the client. So this is the response coming in the form of REST API calls again. Okay, and once these are received, the client will again grab the response, and if required, it will process that, right, based on, right? So this is how the complete architecture is, right, for the WebDriver part. Now, as I said here, right, this WebDriver here, right, this Selenium WebDriver is just this part, right? It has nothing to do with both of these, right? Your browser is sitting already on your browser, on your desktop, right, on your laptop. This Chrome driver thing, right, with Selenium 4, you don't even care, right? Otherwise, what you have to do is you have to go to the website, to the internet. Earlier, you will have to go there and Chrome driver downloads, right? You will have to go on this website and download the relevant version based on the browser version you had. Okay, you see these versions, and based on the browser version you had, you would have to download a compatible one and make it stored. But now even that responsibility is gone. We don't need to do this. So we don't need to take care of this. We don't need to take care of this. We don't even need to take care of this part. But what we need to do is we just need to prepare a client script. But try to understand that this is all still needed, right? As an information for us that how really something is happening in the background. Okay, so this is the complete architecture for the WebDriver part. Now try to understand, right? How many things are happening here, right? Let's say you wrote something in Java. The conversion is happening in the form of REST API calls. It is received, and Chrome driver accepts this, and then it performs some action. Let's say I don't want to use on Chrome. I want to use on Firefox. Again, Firefox team, right? Firefox team will build a driver, right? Will build a driver for Firefox, and they will provide that driver to us, right? Now, see here, right? This generation of the REST API call will remain same, right? There is no difference. Here also the same script will be used, right? And here we'll just specify, okay, run this thing on Firefox. Let's say, right? Again, the same REST API calls will be generated and will be sent to the driver, right? And now internally, right, whatever Firefox thinks is the right thing to do on the browser, right? Whatever translation it will do internally to convert this API calls into a relevant transition on the browser, it will do that, right? But for us, this is same, right? This and this are same. Why these are same? Because every driver, right? Every browser, right, we have to comply with this W3C WebDriver protocol. So it is bringing the consistency so that you don't have to provide different solutions for different browsers. No, right? For the end users like you and me who are automating the task, our job is restricted to just prepare our script once, right? Irrespective of the language, right? So you decide the language, you download the relevant WebDriver package, right? Let me show you. If you would go there, right, on the downloads page, let's say these are the different offerings we have from WebDriver. You could download it, you could use C#, you could use Ruby. We are using Java, right? We could download this and prepare our scripts on it. But let's say someone else is capable of using Python and he decides to use Python. Yeah, please go ahead and prepare the scripts using this, right? But all of this is just helping us to prepare the client. Okay. Once the client is prepared, right? Again, the conversion of the REST API calls would be same, irrespective of the language you're consuming. So try to see the consistency which this WebDriver protocol is bringing, right? This WebDriver protocol is bringing. First of all, you use any language, any specific language, Java, C#, Python, whatever you do, using this WebDriver protocol, everything would be translated in a similar way, right? You will generate an API call. It would be received to irrespective of the driver you use, right? They will consume it, and they will have to understand what you have sent, right? And then they will do internal things, whatever they wanted to do, and perform the necessary action. So try to understand the consistency. You could use you could use these numbers of languages to write your script. You could use any browser, and they will have to support those API calls, right? But this is as of today. Earlier, this was not the case. Okay, I'm coming back to it, and I will also try to highlight one more point. With this W3C WebDriver protocol, right? It is also bringing the consistency for different automation tools, right? Selenium is one such tool which helps us to automate web automation, right? But Selenium is not the only tool available in the market. There are plenty more, right? We have WebDriver, we have Cypress, we have other tools, right? Now, all the tools, right, which works on the similar principle, right? Automating the browser in the similar format, right? What has happened is, like, because of this protocol, right? Because of this guidelines, because of this compliance, what they have to do is any browser who wants to use such approach, right? To any automation tool, right? Which wants to support this automation, right? Using such approach, they will have to comply with this WebDriver protocol, right? So what is happening now is today we are using Selenium, right? And we wrote the code here, right? and this REST API calls are getting generated. Tomorrow, let's say there is another tool, right, which is also complying with this W3 protocol, and it gave you the client library, it gave you the code, right, similar to WebDriver, and using it, you wrote your logic. And once it starts executing, right, it will also get translated in the similar REST API calls. Okay, so try to understand the importance of this W3C WebDriver protocol. Okay, now this is what is happening in today's world, right? Let me just try to portray what was happening earlier, right? When Selenium started, right? When Selenium started, we started with the name as RC, right? As I was saying, remote control, right? Remote control. What was happening in that case? When we used to say remote control, right? RC, Selenium RC, you could understand like this was a combination of two things. One, the client libraries. Again, this is same as the WebDriver part, right? In case of WebDriver, what we have? WebDriver is just what? It's a client library. Client library, like based on whatever language we decide. Similarly, this was the case for RC also. But we also had one more component to it, which was a server. Okay, which was the server. And this is the most important part here, right? The server. And this is where the things change. Okay, I'll come to it. I'm coming to that part. Now, see, right? Here also we have a client library. So what you would do is you would use this client library to prepare your scripts, similar to how you were doing in the WebDriver part as of now, right? So here also we'll prepare the script, right? And even in case of WebDriver also, we were preparing the scripts like here also, right? Now, what is this server here? As I told you, right? In today's world, using WebDriver, you have to use the browser specific driver like this Chrome driver. Again, this is coming. This is this is coming from Google, right? They are providing you this driver, and the browser is also coming from them. Now, in this case, right? Earlier also we had a browser like this, right? Browser, but there was no Chrome driver earlier. Okay, when we started with the Selenium RC, there was no Chrome driver, right? Gradually and eventually, right, the responsibility of preparing such thing has shifted to the originating company which is providing the browser. But earlier that was not the case. Okay, earlier that was not the case. Okay, so over here, right, earlier that was not the case. Now what happens is, right, in this case, right, what was the server? Server was like, it was a jar file. It was a jar file which they were providing, and you would have to spin it up, right? And what will happen is a server will start, like as I showed you in the Selenium in the client server architecture part, like how you can run a jar file, right? You could run it like java -jar and the name of the file, right? And it will start up the server, right? And this is how it was being done. So it used to start up a server, right? So, but understand, you are starting this server on your local machine along with when you wanted to run the script, right? So this is all happening on the machine on which the execution needs to be done. Okay, right? So you had the script there. Now the server is started, right? Now the server is started, and as part of this server, right, there was one module inside this. Okay, there was one module inside this which was based on JavaScript code. Okay, which was the JavaScript code. JavaScript code. Okay, JavaScript code. They gave a special name to this code, and this was named as Selenium core. Okay, Selenium core. Okay, Selenium core. So this was something sitting inside the server. Okay, now when someone has to run the execution, let's say this is the Chrome browser, right? When someone has to do the execution, what they used to do was they used to connect to the server, right? Like let's say they were doing something like this: new remote WebDriver, right? Whatever that syntax is, remote WebDriver. And here we have to provide 4 inputs. One, once the server is starting, right, this server is exposed on a URL. Let's say on a local host, it is exposed on a URL, right? And it has some port, right? Whatever that port number is. So what we need to do here is we need to know the URL of the server, right? So let's say we provide the URL of the server. We will provide the port of this server, right? So that all our transactions can reach to the server, right? Plus we need to tell on what browser we want it to run. Let's say I said Chrome I want to run, right? URL bot Chrome, and there was one more thing. Wait, just a second. There was one more thing which I had. Okay, I'm forgetting that part, but there was one more piece of information which we had to provide. So let's say that we provided all of this, right? Now, what was happening is, right, this is, you're writing in Java file, right? You're writing a JavaScript, a Java file, a Java code, right? You wrote in Java code. All this code, right, was being sent to the server. Okay, it was being sent to the server, right? And once it receives that, it needs to run it on Chrome, right? It needs to run in Chrome. What this will do, this used to inject all of this code, right? All of this JavaScript code inside the browser, right? So what it was doing is, like, all this code, right, which the server had about the JavaScript code, right? And what I'll come to it, like what it really does, right? But all this code gets injected into this Chrome browser. Okay. Now I've already said that on the browser, right? If you're taking a website or something, right? You need three things, right? I mean, browser helps you to run JavaScript code, right? You can run any JavaScript code using any browser, right? So they support running the code, right, of JavaScript. They don't support running Java and all that. No other language is supported, right? You can run things using JavaScript. So Selenium was taking an advantage of that part, right? Selenium wrote some code, right, in the server, and whenever someone asked to run a browser automation using any of the browsers, it used to copy this code, right, this JavaScript code, and inject this into the browser. Now, what was the reason behind this, right? What was happening now is, let me open it. Okay, let me do it here itself. Let's say now what will happen, right? Any logic you've written, let's say I wrote a logic to open up a browser. Let's say wd.get, right? .get. Everything you wrote here, right? It used to receive at this server, right? At this server, right? And then what was happening was, irrespective of the language, right? You wrote this code, right? Everything was getting converted into JavaScript. So this JavaScript code, right? This JavaScript code over here was making a transition, right? Was making a translation from Java. Let's say for Java, right? I wrote my code in Java, right? It was translating everything into JavaScript. It was translating everything into JavaScript, right? And since browser understands JavaScript, it was able to run all of that script on the browser and achieve the required objective, right? So this is just a small example, right? But this is how the all the translations, right, which the RC was doing, right? It was first picking up your Java code, translating into the JavaScript code, and then making the required things on the browser, right? So that was the process of doing everything, right? So that was the process which it was doing there, right? Now, what is there, right, to understand here? Now, what is the problem, right? What was the problem? See, first of all, you wrote the code in your own language, right? The Java part, right? Then it is getting translated. It is first of all things, right, which you wanted to send. First of all, Selenium RC, right, was pushing its own code, which is Selenium core, right, on the browser, which was this, right, Chrome browser or something, right? It was pushing everything onto this. So browser already had some logic and some additional logic to run, first of all, right? So it was impacting the performance of the browser already. Then there was an additional task where all your code, this is Java, person could be writing in Python or any other language, right? So same also for them also, that translation has to happen. Let's say for Java, right, the all of your code, right, was passed to the browser. It reached here in Selenium core. It translated your Java into JavaScript, right? And then executed your JavaScript code, executed the code on the browser, right? And whatever action it could translate into, it performed that, right? But see the translation, right? And see the number of hops it has to go through, right? And you are doing all of this inside the browser, right? Selenium core is sitting inside the browser. right? And all this translation is happening here also. So again, this is not the native technology of the browser. Native technology is this Chrome driver, right? They know how to do it in the right way. JavaScript is just an additional thing which we as a user, end user, have, right? So that we could do things on the browser. But to prepare the browser and do all the functioning inside this, right? The team who's preparing the browser knows the best, right? So what happens because of this, right? It used to add lot of delays, it used to hang up, it used to create a lot of issues for us, right? Let's say we wrote some logic here, right, for which the translation did not happen correctly in the JavaScript file, like it will just break up my code, right? And it was getting hard to maintain all the updates which were coming in the market, right? And remember, we have to do this translation for all of these things, right? So they came up with a better idea, right? And again, right, when things started, right, they first developed JSON WebDriver Protocol. Okay, today we use what I told you. We use W3C WebDriver Protocol, which is this W3C WebDriver Protocol. WebDriver Protocol. Okay, we use this part, right? It's a guideline which all the automation tool has to follow while making some conversions from the code to a REST API call, so that these can be passed as an input to the drivers so that they can perform the automation task on a specific browser. Okay, that is what it does, right? And this is the page for it, right? You can see all this new session. If you have to generate a session, you need to receive, you need to translate your action into this post code, right? And whatever input is required. Now what happens with this, all this, right? Earlier, when things were starting, right, when they moved to WebDriver, W3C protocol was not there, right? So Selenium team themselves, right, from the scratch, they wrote their own. They came up with the design, said that okay, we will prepare JSON WebDriver protocol, okay, and we will remove this web Selenium RC part, right? And because they were facing a lot of issues, right? So they came up with this JSON WebDriver protocol, and then what they did was they designed WebDriver, right? Now using WebDriver, we were writing our scripts like the client library as earlier, right? So the client library was same, right? Now instead of in RC, what we had client library plus server. So they deprecated the server, but took out the client library from it and formed it here, right? And made some modification and named it as WebDriver, right? Now we had this now, right? And they also prepared this protocol. This protocol was doing the same thing. It was translating, right, all your JavaScript code, all your Java code, right, into an REST API calls. REST API calls, right? And then they earlier, right, when things started, they were maintaining the drivers of the browsers by themselves, right? So this Chrome driver and all that, right? Whatever driver you wanted to work, Selenium team was maintaining them, right? But again, see the headache they had to perform. They have to maintain the JSON WebDriver protocol also. They have to maintain the drivers for the specific browser also, right? This is one driver. There was Firefox driver and all that, right? So they were doing all of this. Now, but by doing this approach, right, they were able to overcome some of the challenges which RC was giving us, right? And as the time progressed, right, this JSON WebDriver protocol, right, was taken as an input to form what? To form this W3C WebDriver protocol. Okay, if you would go in the documentation, you would find that this protocol here, right, is using maximum information coming from this baseline protocol which was formed from scratch by the Selenium team. Okay, so try to understand the contribution which the Selenium team has provided into the world of automation or automation testing, right? So this was used as a base, and using the compliance and all that, they came up with this protocol, which is now available for all the tools in the market who wants to do the web automation. Okay, not just Selenium. And Selenium, like Selenium is using this protocol now. Appium is using such protocol now, right? The same protocol. Now, this is also doing the same thing, right? This is converting this into REST API calls. But now, over the period of time, right, the responsibility of maintaining these drivers is not of Selenium anymore. They don't do it. this responsibility, the relevant vendors, right? For Chrome, it is Google. So that responsibility has been shifted to the respective vendors, right? So now Google prepares this Chrome driver for us, right? And they are the best people to do it. They are the one who designed Chrome, right? So they are the ones who know the best how to interact with the browser. We just provide them the required inputs, they receive it and do the necessary action, and all the same things happens on the browser, right? And this is what the current structure is. It got replaced with instead of JSON, we use W3C WebDriver Protocol now. And instead of maintaining these drivers by themselves, these are maintained by the respective vendors. And this is what the complete structure is, right? And this is what I wanted to cover for the Selenium architecture also, right? Again, we have already seen like how all of this works, right? So I'm not going to repeat that. I don't want to add on the time on this. But right, if you wanted to see like how all of this works, please watch the previous sessions. But this is what the Selenium architecture is all about. Okay. And I hope, okay, stop presenting, right? And I hope that you got the insight of it, like how things works, and what is the architecture behind this, right? And how things evolve in Selenium, right? And this is what I wanted to share today with respect to Selenium architecture. I'll come next week with some more topics, right? And we'll see like how it can benefit you, and we'll try to explain that part. Okay. Any questions anyone has, feel free to please raise your hand and you can ask. Okay, yeah, please. Okay, open queue. Just a second. I'll give you the access. Just wait. Yes, please, okay. You can you have the access to speak. If you're speaking, I cannot hear you.
Oh yeah. So can I talk now?
Yes, you can talk now, please.
Yeah. Thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you for imparting the testing community, especially for automation. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Uh,
Thank you, man.
yeah. I want us to see a situation whereby we practice our automation in DevOps environment, because I think that's what is really lacking. I don't know if you can hear me.
I can hear you, but can you be a bit loud and please repeat
All
that
right.
again?
All right. All right. I said I want to see a situation whereby we can practice our automation in a DevOps environment. You know, something like how to really do CI/CD very well, because a lot of times we have knowledge of it, but in the real world, our project, like me personally, my project does not really involve CI/CD. You know, so if I can have a project whereby we really do it live, not just reading for interview sake, you know, oftentimes we read a lot of things about this work in interview, but when you get into the real world, you don't really see it in action. I'm talking about myself. So I'd love to see that in your courses. Yes, sir.
Okay. Are you talking about the full stack bootcamp thing?
Yes. The
Okay.
life bootcamp. Yeah.
Okay. See, again, I'm running two boot camps. One is this, which is architecture boot camp, where my agenda is to just explain different architectures which are needed to understood from from the tools perspective, or if there is something from the dev perspective also. I will try to bring it up and explain this. Right. Coming on to your specific question about CI/CD, right? If that is the need, right? I do plan to have one session on this automation architecture bootcamp also. But again, this would be just a general overview about how things works, right? And I do have it in my schedule to cover it. But if you are looking, if you're asking, if you're saying that it should be included in my full stack bootcamp, which is a paid course, something, right? And if you're advising there, then yes, we have it there and we are going to cover it from scratch. And we are going to do it on a live project. I
All right.
hope I'm getting your question.
All right. All right. But you have not updated us on the cost of the boot camp. I've been waiting about that for a while now. It has not come
Right.
up.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. See, as I said, right. I hope you have received some mails from me or no.
Yes, I received mail where we fill the form, but you said you're going to send us information about the cost, but we've not got that.
But
I have not
okay,
gotten that.
Okay, I have not sent the cost information, but did you receive a mail from podtest.in?
Recently, no, not recently. I think, but when I registered about a month ago, I got an information that the program is coming up by March, something like that,
Okay,
and
okay,
sort of.
okay. Okay, see, actually, the point is that we were in the phase of finalizing the cost of it. Okay, we are almost there, and it is just 3 days left, right? I would be sending a mail to everyone who have registered, right? I have a many registrations in that bootcamp as of now, and people are too much interested and excited about it, right? So I do plan to share the information, but I want to share the correct information with everyone. So please allow me couple of days more. Again, this is very affordable. This would be the most affordable course which you would find across in the industry. And if you would go through the syllabus, you will find that syllabus is very immense, and the duration of it is around 6 to 9 months. Okay, and it's a daily life classes. So please allow me couple of days more. I will come back and share the details with everyone who have registered, right? And this is only per invitation basis. Whoever is interested, only that will receive the information. So you have, I know that you have registered. Please allow me 2 or 3 days more. I will give you the exact information. Okay.
All right, yeah. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Thank
Yep.
you.
No worries. No worries. And thank you for asking the question. And thank you for showing the interest. Thank you. And thank you also for joining today. Not to you, but everyone who is joined today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Anyone else who wants to ask something or some around any of this topic? No. Okay, then I think we are good to close the call, and I'm very happy that you all joined. Thank you so much, and let's meet next time with some other topic. Thank you so much. Have a nice day. Have a nice week. Bye bye. Take care.